He was the billionaire CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, used to being the smartest person in the room. One day, as a joke, he asked the janitor for financial advice, expecting a laugh. But what she said next left him utterly speechless and changed the way he viewed money, success, and humility forever. The clock on the wall of Sterling Enterprises read 10:47 p.m. The skyscraper's glass walls reflected the city lights below, flickering like stars. In the corner of the vast open-plan office, the janitor moved quietly, pushing a mop and emptying trash bins. Alexander Sterling, the billionaire CEO, leaned back in his ergonomic leather chair, feet on the desk, reviewing spreadsheets on 3 massive monitors. He had built an empire from scratch, navigating billion-dollar deals, mergers, and stock markets with surgical precision. Success was his language, power his comfort zone, yet tonight fatigue mixed with a rare streak of mischief. Watching the janitor work quietly, he smirked. "You know what?" he muttered to himself. "Why not?" Alexander called the janitor over. "Hey," he said, trying to sound casual, almost playful. "You ever think about money? Investments? Stocks?" The janitor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a calm demeanor, paused mid-step, looking up at him. I pay my bills," she replied carefully, unsure if she should answer. Alexander chuckled softly, leaning back, fingers steepled. Really, if you had $1 billion, what would you do with it?" His tone carried amusement. He expected a laugh, a shrug, maybe a silly remark about yachts or vacations. After all, he was a billionaire. The idea that a janitor could offer anything remotely insightful about money was almost absurd. The janitor smiled faintly, tilting her head. She didn't laugh. She didn't joke. She simply took a deep breath and looked directly at him. Her eyes calm, steady, and thoughtful. And in that instant, Alexander had no idea that the next words would shake the very foundation of his assumptions about success. Wealth and intelligence. Alexander Sterling leaned back in his chair, expecting the janitor to fumble, joke, or brush off his question. Instead, she took a slow breath, her eyes meeting his with quiet clarity. "If I had $1 billion, she said softly, yet with surprising confidence, "I wouldn't just spend it. I'd make it work for me. I'd invest in things that grow, not just glitter. And I'd make sure it helps people, not just myself." Her voice was calm, almost measured, yet it carried a weight that made Alexander pause. There was no arrogance, no pretense, just pure practical wisdom. Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Interesting," he said, leaning forward. "Go on." She smiled faintly and continued. "Most people think money is about power or showing off. But real money, real wealth, it's about choices. It's about patience, discipline, and understanding value. Not the price tag, but what it can actually do for you and others." Alexander's fingers stilled over his keyboard. He had read thousands of financial reports, negotiated billions, and studied the world's wealthiest minds. Yet these words, coming from a janitor, cut through the noise like a clear bell in a storm. "You see, sir," she added, "sometimes the smartest decisions are the simplest ones. Don't overcomplicate. Don't assume more is always better. Understand what you have and respect it." The billionaire CEO, used to commanding boardrooms and dominating shareholders, felt a strange mixture of awe and humility. He had expected entertainment, a moment of light humor. Instead, he found himself listening intently, absorbing advice that rivaled anything he had ever been taught. For the first time in years, Alexander Sterling realized something uncomfortable. Wisdom didn't always come from degrees, offices, or titles. Sometimes it came quietly, unexpectedly, from the least likely source. And in that moment, the office, once just a place of numbers and power, felt like the beginning of a lesson he would never forget. Alexander Sterling leaned back, gripping the armrests of his chair. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were wide with disbelief. He had expected a joke, a shrug, maybe even confusion. But this was something entirely different. "Wait," he said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're serious?" The janitor nodded calmly, her posture unassuming, yet her words carried a quiet authority. Completely. Money isn't just about numbers or status. It's about understanding value, what it can do, and who it affects. Alexander ran a hand over his face, trying to process it. Every executive meeting, every high-stakes negotiation, every financial seminar he had attended seemed suddenly overcomplicated and hollow compared to the simplicity and clarity of her advice. "Tell me more," he said, leaning forward now, a mixture of intrigue and humility in his tone. The janitor smiled slightly, as if she had expected this. "You focus so much on accumulation," she continued, "but what about preservation? Growth isn't always about chasing the next big deal. Sometimes it's about patience, discipline, and understanding the impact of every choice." Alexander felt a stirring he hadn't felt in years. Genuine curiosity, unclouded by ego or competition. He began asking questions, tentatively at first. "So if you had $1 billion, what would be your first investment?" She thought for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I'd start small. Find something sustainable. Something that helps people while also generating value. And I'd make sure I understand it fully before moving on." Haste is the enemy of wealth. For Alexander, it was a revelation. Here was a woman whose title, her role, society's expectations, none of it mattered. Her intelligence, perspective, and insight were undeniable. He realized how many assumptions he had made in life about people, about money, about success. He had underestimated wisdom when it didn't wear a suit or carry a corner office. I didn't expect this," he admitted, a rare honesty in his voice. "I've read books, attended seminars, consulted experts, but your advice, it's different." The janitor simply shrugged modestly, as if this were ordinary, as if sharing insight were as natural as cleaning the floors. In that moment, Alexander's mind began to shift. Curiosity replaced arrogance. Shock gave way to reflection. For the first time, he wondered, how much wisdom had he missed by judging others by their position? How many opportunities for insight had he overlooked because of ego? Could the simplest advice, coming from the most unlikely source, outshine all the strategies he had learned in his career? He leaned back again, staring at the janitor with new respect. His world of boardrooms, numbers, and prestige suddenly felt smaller, simpler, and yet richer because of her words. And for the first time in years, Alexander Sterling, Billionaire CEO, felt like a student again. The office was quiet the next morning. Alexander Sterling sat alone at his corner desk, city lights still twinkling outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. His laptop was open, spreadsheets and financial reports sprawled across the screen, but his mind wasn't on numbers. It was on the janitor's words, still echoing in his thoughts. Growth isn't always about chasing the next big deal. Haste is the enemy of wealth. Her words were simple, almost ordinary, but to Alexander they were revolutionary. He thought of the countless meetings, seminars, and financial advice sessions he had attended. He had always measured success in terms of speed, scale, and profit. Bigger, faster, more. Yet the janitor had reminded him of something essential. True wealth is about patience, understanding, and meaningful choices. Alexander realized he had spent too long listening only to people with titles, overlooking insight from unexpected sources. He began asking himself, what opportunities had I missed by underestimating people? How can I make my wealth truly impactful rather than just bigger? Am I chasing numbers, or am I creating value? For the first time, he understood that wisdom wasn't confined to boardrooms or elite seminars. It could be found anywhere, from anyone, if only you listened. That day, Alexander began applying her advice. He reviewed his company's portfolio with fresh eyes. He paused on high-risk, flashy deals and focused instead on sustainable, long-term investments. He analyzed the true impact of each decision, asking whether it helped people, created value, or was merely for prestige. He even started mentoring young employees he had previously overlooked, valuing their insight rather than dismissing it. Each choice was deliberate, guided by clarity, patience, and practicality, principles the janitor had shared casually. Yet profoundly, Alexander also noticed subtle changes in himself. His ego softened. Replaced by curiosity and humility, he began recognizing wisdom in others. Regardless of position or appearance, he felt gratitude for unexpected teachers, like the janitor, who reminded him that true intelligence is not always loud, and true advice doesn't always come with a title. Within weeks, the impact of these shifts became apparent. Profitable investments stabilized and grew steadily. Employee morale improved as Alexander listened more and judged less. He began seeing wealth as a tool, not a trophy, a means to create meaningful change rather than just accumulate numbers. One afternoon, Alexander returned to the office floor, spotting the janitor quietly cleaning. He walked over, no longer with mockery, no longer expecting a joke. Instead, he nodded with genuine respect. "I took your advice," he said sincerely. "It changed the way I look at everything, the company, the money, even myself." The janitor simply smiled, modest and calm. No celebration, no fanfare, just quiet satisfaction. In that moment, Alexander realized something profound. The right advice, when heard with humility, could transform not just decisions, but a life. The billionaire CEO had learned a lesson far greater than any financial strategy. He had learned the value of listening, of humility, and of wisdom found in unexpected places. The office lights had dimmed, leaving only the warm glow of Alexander Sterling's desk lamp. Outside, the city shimmered like a sea of gold, reflecting the empire he had built. Yet inside, the billionaire CEO felt a subtle shift, a quiet realization that wealth alone did not define greatness. He glanced across the office floor and saw the janitor, quietly finishing her rounds. She looked up and caught his eye. He nodded, a gesture of genuine respect, not patronage. "Thank you," he whispered softly, almost to himself. It wasn't about the advice itself, though it had been invaluable. It was about the lesson she embodied. Intelligence, wisdom, and insight often come from the most unexpected places. Titles, positions, and appearances were meaningless compared to experience. Clarity and perspective. Alexander sat back. Reflecting on the weeks since their conversation, he had stopped rushing, choosing patience and deliberate decision-making over hasty, flashy deals. His employees now felt heard, empowered, and respected. He realized that true leadership was rooted in listening, not commanding. He had embraced humility, understanding that no one is too small to teach, and no one is too big to learn. Every time he faced a tough financial decision, he recalled the janitor's words. Growth isn't always about chasing the next big deal. Sometimes it's about patience, discipline, and understanding the impact of every choice. These simple words had sparked a profound change, both in his company and in himself. As Alexander gazed out over the city skyline, he realized the ultimate truth of that night. Wisdom is not bound by title or status. The greatest insights often come from the least expected sources. Humility and open-mindedness are more valuable than arrogance or pride. He had built an empire, but it was the lesson of listening, respect, and humility that had truly transformed him. Camera pans from Alexander, sitting at his desk, to the janitor walking past the office window, mop in hand, a soft smile on her face. Sometimes the most profound lessons come from the quietest voices. Success isn't measured by wealth alone. It's measured by wisdom, humility, and the courage to listen. And sometimes the person you least expect can teach you the lesson you never knew you needed.